to everybody, and welcoming everyone to this second live panel of the Adams Sustainability Celebration. I do want to note, and you probably just got the pop-up window, that this is going to be a recorded event and will be distributed on a couple of UFT outlets. So by joining us today, there's that possibility it will be recorded, and that by virtue of attending, you're agreeing to that. So thank you, and we'll start the recording and go from there. This celebration is a tribute to what we've done to our growing community and what we hope to achieve with sustainability-minded students, faculty, and staff right across all of the University of Toronto. It's hosted by our Committee on Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainability, or CECCS, and made possible through a generous donation from Wendy Adams. Really hoping that this series is going to help us celebrate its success, inspire some new activities, build some strong relationships in this space, especially around sustainability in all its various different forms. Today, we're going to be talking about climate positive and what climate positive means at the University of Toronto. I'm going to be the moderator. My name is Ron Supporta. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at our St. George campus. And I also have the pleasure of being able to co-chair the CECCS and get involved in a lot of what we are doing across our institution in and around sustainability. I really want to thank everyone for joining today. A couple of quick reminders from a Zoom etiquette perspective. I want to make sure that we've got quite a positive environment that is inclusive and respectful. If there is anything inappropriate from a video or a verbal or written perspective, we are going to start to remove individuals, but we're really hopeful and quite confident in our community in the ability to have that respectful dialogue. If there's any questions for us, for the panelists, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to use the chat functions, where I'm going to do my best to moderate that and to get to those questions after we hear some of our panelists and their presentations. I think it's important to acknowledge the land of which University of Toronto operates for thousands of years has been the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississauga, the Credit. And today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in this land. I also just, if you'll indulge me for 30 seconds, I always like to reflect on the land acknowledgement. And I think, if anything, it is extremely salient in terms of the topic that we're talking about today, which really has to do with our campus, how our campus interacts with the broader environment. And, in my work that I've had an opportunity to do with CECCS, I've really learned around that, the linkage that we have with what we're trying to achieve and the great knowledge and the workings in Indigenous learnings that exist in this space. And I'm hopeful that through this and through my work, we have an opportunity to build some of those bridges. I think one important thing to note, when myself and our co-chair, John Robinson, looked at the membership of CECCS this year, we've included important stakeholders from many different groups, including our Indigenous partners, and making sure that they have a seat at the table and voices are heard when we talk about sustainability in this context. So that's what it means to me, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. Today, we're talking about a climate positive institution. And climate change is definitely one of the most important issues of our time. And when we look at it from a carbon perspective, there's a realization that Canada's made a commitment to be a net zero country by the year 2050. And that's definitely an important national acknowledgement, and it manifests itself on our campuses in many different ways. From an operations perspective, a significant portion of the greenhouse gas emissions that we have as an institution relate to our campuses, our buildings, our energy use, and how we operate them. Many people might not know this, but we have, as a tri-campus, over 110,000 metric tons of carbon emissions on an annual basis. That's a big number, and that's a number that's equivalent to the entire college sector in this province. Actually is greater than any automotive manufacturing that occurs in the province of Ontario. It's a big number. You don't necessarily think of higher education and think of carbon, but it's there, and it's not, I don't emphasize the size of that number and the magnitude of it because we're proud of it. Not a badge of honor, but it's definitely a call to action. And today we're going to hear about a lot of what that action is through our panelists that we have today. On the St. George campus, we've released a climate positive plan in the fall, and it really represents, I think, a first step for our institution in moving towards what we've been calling a climate positive situation. So what is climate positive? I think that's not a well-defined term in the industry, and almost ambiguous and purposeful. And for us, what it means is looking at our campus, looking at what we do specifically from a scope 1 and scope 2 perspective, and start to challenge ourselves to not just think of it in net zero terms, but to understand how we can go beyond that and be in a net negative situation. Now, I don't know if anyone wants to aspire to a negative goal. If we want to be net negative by 2050. So we call that climate positive, just so we can have a positive spin on it, because it definitely is a positive spin in terms of the impact that it could play. So today we're going to hear more from our panelists about this, about some important initiatives that are happening. We're going to give each of them an opportunity to present. Like I mentioned, there'll be a Q&A at the end of it. And I just want to once again reiterate my appreciation for everyone who's joined us today. Hopefully this also gets viewed quite extensively afterwards. And once again, also to our panelists for taking the time to come and put the materials together and share everything that they've done. So I'm going to welcome all of them, and then I'll turn it over to our first speaker. But our first one is Professor David Sinton. Professor Sinton is a professor in our Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering and leads the Climate Positive Energy Institutional Strategic Initiative, or ISI, at the university. He's also the Canadian Research Chair in Microfluidics and Energy. He is one of our proud alumnus, both at a bachelor and PhD level, and also has a master's from McGill. And today he's going to be talking to us about that ISI and how it interplays with this. After that, we're going to turn it over to Mark Couture. Mark Couture is our Director of the Sustainability Office and Energy Management at the St. George campus. He is really focused on leading our charge on climate positive at St. George and what it means, and he's going to share that with us today. He's a mechanical engineer. He's a certified energy manager. He's a whole bunch of things. I have the pleasure of working with him and all the other panelists as well, so I look forward to hearing what he has to say. Jeff Miller is our Director of Facilities Management and Capital Projects at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. Also an alumnus, mechanical engineer. And will be talking to us today about the campus low carbon improvement initiatives and how UTSC is taking their part in our climate positive future. And Ahmed Azari is our Director of Utilities and Sustainability out at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus. He is going to be presenting to us today the UTM campus-wide energy audit. And I guess, remiss in saying that he's a mechanical engineer and also a certified energy manager. So you can see that we've got quite a lot of excellent brain power and knowledge that we're hoping to be able to share with us their good work today. And with that intro, I'll turn it over to Professor Sinton.
Great, thanks, Ron. And it's also comforting to know there's just so many mechanical engineers on this panel. That's great.
Probably should have said I'm a civil engineer, but that's okay.
Don't say that. It's great to have the opportunity to share about this initiative, climate positive energy. And the first thing you'll notice is that we were inspired. I guess that's one way we could put it. We were inspired by Ron's initiative at the university level, Climate Positive Campus. And another way you could say it is that we stole their name. We really wanted to align this research initiative with the Climate Positive Campus and that overall message. So this Climate Positive Energy initiative is all about funding research that can bring us towards those net zero goals, and those goals of the university, also the city and the world. So I'm going to take a few slides here to tell you about this. We're really launched as of this quarter, and we're excited. Got a bunch of things on the go. The overall goals are supporting the university, city, and the world in reaching net negative or climate positive outcomes through research. So this is really, you think about the university, Ron mentioned how, our own activities have significant emissions, and Ron's team are at work in reducing those. We can also say, well, the university's research heft, right? The great minds that are in the research, the faculty, the students, postdoctoral fellows, these folks can contribute a great deal. And that's what this climate positive energy initiative is about, is really using that research strength towards climate positive goals. First one, fund the research, right? Fund those researchers, enable those students in those projects. Second, really bring the outside in. So build those external partnerships as well as internal partnerships, and make sure the outcomes of that research are reaching the broad audience that they deserve. So knowledge translation. And last but not least, do all of that through our main mandate, which is providing trading opportunities for students, PDFs, and faculty. We think about our initiative as really wildly multidisciplinary, and when I say that, I mean we're stretching not just across all 3 campuses, but all the disciplines. And it's just been a real journey for me to reach outside my world, which is in engineering, and then more broadly, I had a little better understanding of science, but then further out into other faculties and other jurisdictions and divisions, and really think about how this could all fit together. That's really a strength of the University of Toronto. A fundamental strength is just the incredible breadth and strength that we have in these various areas. The challenge is, how do you organize, right? Political science is in a separate department from a lot of the climate modeling, which is in a separate department from a lot of the engineering, and these are in separate divisions. So these ISIs, this thing we're launching, the goal is to really link across campus in a way that departments and divisions just can't do. So on the left pillar, you see a lot of the social, the political, the economic, business friends, entrepreneurship, all of those elements on the left-hand side. And on the right, here we've got a bit more of the engineering flavor and science, expanding renewable energy, reducing carbon. And the key to these 2 pillars is that everything we do links the 2. It's really the connective tissue that's important and not the categorization. We're a small network, of course, within the broader context of on the left circle, the university, and the middle circle, the city, and then on the right circle, the world. Just highlight a few organizations we're very connected with and really working in concert with. Climate Positive Campus, I mentioned, of course, where we got our name and our motivation. And then, just other ISIs around the campus. The Sustainability Lab is an exciting thing coming to the rooftop of chemical engineering, various institutes. At the city level, we're just starting now to expand and to look at who we can collaborate with within the city of Toronto, and what funders are available to and open to really working with us to fund projects that would reduce urban emissions. I'll tell you about one story in a minute, where a current project we're doing in Scarborough. And on the right-hand side, just a few examples of institutes like us at other great institutions that we're connected with, and that are our peers and mentors, and other opportunities to collaborate outside of the university and the city. This is the executive committee. I won't take you through all the details here, other than to say it's really tri-campus. Jody's University of Toronto, Mississauga. Alexander and Laura are both UT Scarborough. Kate and John are downtowners. It really is a tri-campus, multidisciplinary committee, and that's a microcosm of the overall initiative, which has over 100 faculty tri-campus wide. Got some great staff and a few empty circles here. We're hiring currently for these others. We're really excited to have Shatha and Hannah on board, who are just doing a great job launching this initiative. In terms of research themes, when we drill down, how do we prioritize projects? And there's really these 3, and then we'll talk about jurisdictions in a second. Just transitions, what's that? So that's looking at mitigating the consequences, the unintended consequences often of clean energy production, looking at the full life cycle of emissions, and also looking at that in the context of communities, in the context of the social aspect. Carbon, at the center of climate and energy is, of course, carbon emissions. So here, really looking at the key challenges to get to that last third of emissions that are going to be so challenging. And lastly, one thing we actually got this from alumni who we sought out to give some input on this initiative, and they say, hey, listen, the university, you guys are great at measurements and assessing markets, these aspects, really quantifying. We think about ESG, carbon pricing, these kinds of topics. You know, the university can really lead in setting some policy and some standards and some even some mechanisms for how these sorts of measurements are done. Those are the three themes, but we want to make sure as we move along that we're having impacts where at the university, right at home, and the city, and then globally. So I think about this in terms of a grid. If we think of those three themes that are guiding us, that's where we want to have our impacts. And then the three jurisdictions, the university, city, and the world on the left. Then our first call for proposals, I'm happy to say, really hits the first three. So we're checking off that first row with research, funding research projects that can help the Climate Positive Campus Initiative reduce emissions at the university level. A couple of project spotlights here. One is, these are some things we've already got cooking, some current projects. The first one is really cool, Urban Just Transitions Cluster. This is in Scarborough, and some researchers at the UTSC that have come together. Again, a bit of a microcosm of our overall tri-campus thing. They're very multidisciplinary, taking that approach, and they're looking at, how to accelerate equitable transitions to low carbon cities, and with ensuring high quality of life and equitable transition. So that's a challenging proposition and an important one. And what's really cool about this is they focused on Scarborough and said, okay, what does this mean? What does net zero mean for this community, for this urban center? The second one is a project that I'm involved with, Can Store Energy, and this is motivated by the fact that there is substantial renewable capacity in Canada, so ability to make renewable energy in a variety of ways. All of those are deeply seasonal. So an example of this is the Yukon grid here. This is disconnected from the rest of North America. And they have, in some ways, they're 2 decades ahead of us up there. They've got huge amounts of renewables, in that case, hydroelectric. But again, it's very seasonal, so they need a means to store it. They waste energy in the summer, and then they have to import diesel fuel for electricity generation in the winter. It's crazy, but it's because there's no seasonal storage solution. And then we've got a very advanced community in the far north of Yukon. There, they've got huge solar generation. Same problem. They have to import diesel for the winter. In the south, we've got analogous questions and challenges, but different. Grid-connected communities, large emissions. So how can we square this circle and provide seasonal energy storage, really get the most out of renewable energy in these jurisdictions? And that's all. I'll pass it on to my other panelists and look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, David. So I'll turn it over to Mark, who talked to us about the St. George campus.
Thank you very much, Ron. Just be a second here as I pull up my my visuals. Perfect. How's that? I'm gonna assume that's okay. So I'd like to talk to you guys.
I can't see your slides.
Oh, no slides. No slides? Oh, okay. Sorry. What do you see?
Nothing.
See you.
See me. Yeah, let's try that again. Share screen. Share. I think it worked.
Yes,
Is
that's
that better? Wonderful. Thank you. Well, sorry about that. So Ron and David really led in really well here to the climate positive campus. What we've developed over the last year and a half at the St. George campus is a strategy to decarbonize our campus. And what we're looking at doing here is decarbonizing by about 80% absolute on scopes 1 and 2. And what we're hoping to do here is have the university become climate positive by 2050. If we look at that trajectory here, we have where we are as of 2020 was roughly 93,000 metric tons of carbon, and that's for scopes 1 and 2. And if you'll notice on the left-hand side of the graph, that is very comparable to where we were back in 1990 with 91,000 metric tons for scopes 1 and 2. If you look historically, what you'll see is the campus grew substantially. And we grew in a situation where the electrical grid was also a little bit dirtier than it is today. So a lot of that decarbonization you see from 2008 or 9 down to 2020 is sort of a 1-2 punch, where there was some decarbonization efforts happening on campus, but also in large part due to the decarbonization of the electrical grid in Ontario. And where we're looking to move here is down somewhere before 2050. We're looking to cross that x-axis and actually go into the negative territory, where our St. George campus will actually become a carbon sink. If we want to step back and look a little bit more broadly at our goals here for our climate positive campus, goal number 1 is to responsibly manage the growth of our campus. We're forecasted to grow by about 80% from today up towards 2050. And by responsibly managing that growth, we plan to mitigate the environmental impacts of that increase in campus square footage and space. A second goal here is to renew existing and aged utility infrastructure. Our campus operates on a district heating and partially on a district cooling network, as well as a microgrid. So as we go to renew these aged assets, we really want to create some resiliency there. And that's number 3, build resilient low carbon systems. And this will support our carbon reduction targets with reliable infrastructure by changing how our campus actually produces, distributes, and consumes energy. If we want to go a little bit closer into our first priority, some of the actions we've taken around responsibly managing our growth. In 2020, the University of Toronto implemented a sustainability and energy performance standard. This standard, for those that might be familiar, it closely mirrors the Toronto Green Standard, but it actually is a little bit more demanding than the Toronto Green Standard, where we've actually implemented carbon and energy budgets for all new buildings that are constructed on the campus. And this is the policy vehicle that we use to actually mitigate the impacts of growth. We are also looking at, we are extending our district energy system so that all new buildings are connected to our highly efficient low carbon district energy system. And lastly, we're looking at increasing the use of renewable energy, including a large off-campus solar farm. And as we look to decrease our emissions, our scope 1 and 2 emissions on campus by 80%, the off-campus solar farm is what's going to serve to offset that remaining less than 20% of the scope 1 and 2 emissions. Our second goal here is to renew our infrastructure. And a few of the key tenets there are that we want to eliminate fossil fuel-based heating as a primary source on our St. George campus. So everything moving forward, as of July 2020, we're giving the guidance that we want to not install any new fossil fuel burning appliances for heating the campus. Number 2 here is undertake a steam to hot water conversion. This is probably one of the most complicated pieces of our puzzle here to decarbonize and achieve our targets. We have a very old district heating system, and it's steam-based for a large part of it. And converting from steam to low temperature hot water is key in sort of facilitating a transition towards renewables and electrification of our heating systems. And that requires a lot of careful consideration. So the third one here is renew and electrify our central power plant. Our central power plant heats approximately 80% of our downtown campus. And it is powered by 4 immense natural gas steam boilers. And these boilers all date back to the 50s and 60s. So we are looking to renew them with modern low carbon technology. And we're looking to electrify some of these boilers in the future. And last one here is significantly reduce existing building energy use through deep energy retrofits. So that kind of goes hand in hand with number 2, where we're doing the steam to hot water conversions. So when we talk about deep energy retrofits on our campus, first and foremost, we want to facilitate the operation of these buildings on low temperature hot water. And secondly, we want to reduce the demand. Our performance standards that I talked about in the last slide also give us very aggressive energy use intensity reduction targets for any renovations that happen on our campus. So typically we're looking at reducing the energy use intensity in the area of 40+%, both through our performance standards as well as through our deep energy retrofit program. So this serves to not only reduce the demand, but significantly decarbonize. Our last goal here was to build very resilient systems. So here we're going to increase the use of electricity to heat our campus using existing technologies like Geo Exchange. We're also looking to create interconnected nodal plants to increase redundancy and resiliency. Think of this as a mesh network, but on a very large scale for a district energy system, where if one node happens to go offline for whatever reason, that the buildings can still be served by other adjacent nodes. We're also going to introduce new interconnected electricity feeds to increase reliability. So similarly to our chilled water and our low temperature hot water, we will have multiple substations for our electrical microgrid that will operate in a similar way to our interconnected district energy system. A project that we're very excited about is one that is ongoing currently on our front campus in King's College Circle. We have taken the first steps towards installing Canada's largest urban Geo Exchange System. What we've done here is we've drilled over 370 boreholes in our historic quad in King's College Circle. And these boreholes go down 250 meters deep, or roughly 850 feet. And that's roughly half the height of the CN Tower. So imagine 370 boreholes going down into the ground. And what we're going to do with this Geo Exchange system is we're going to take all the waste heat that our campus essentially tries to evacuate from our buildings and from all the processes and everything else through air conditioning. So air conditioning is actually extracting heat from the buildings. We're going to capture all this waste heat and we're going to store it in the ground. So our Geo Exchange system here acts as a big thermal battery, storing waste heat seasonally and taking the excess in the summer, put it into the ground, and that will allow us to extract that heat in the winter. So essentially we'll be offsetting roughly 15,000 metric tons of carbon by using this waste heat and capturing it seasonally to heat the buildings in the winter. And that actually offsets fossil fuel consumption at our central plant. One of Ron's favorite pieces here is our subterranean classroom. So you can see in the top right of the screen, we're envisioning a seating area and a classroom area that can be booked by professors such as David Sinton to take his class and his students in and give them a live sort of example of how a Geo Exchange System would work and use this as a live on-campus demonstration tool. And we're also hoping this will be a space where people can walk through, and ask questions and hopefully be inspired. So if we look at sort of the wedge chart here of what we're looking at for how we're going to achieve our targets for 2050, you can see the top line would sort of show the impacts of unmitigated growth on our campus, as we would sort of double our campus square footage or increase that square footage by roughly 80%. The building design standards there would keep us sort of at our status quo. They significantly mitigate the impacts of growth and even go down slightly, as they do also impact renovations on campus. When we look at building retrofits, as we mentioned, converting from steam to hot water and the deep energy retrofit program, that will further serve to reduce our carbon emissions on campus. And one of the big pieces there in yellow is the utility infrastructure renewal and electrification. So this is really converting our central steam plant towards interconnected nodal plants, which will be powered by heat pumps to supply low temperature hot water to our district heating system. That, of course, is supplemented by the Geo Exchange fields, like the one in King's College Circle, which will further help decarbonize our campus. And the last piece there, that last roughly 18,000 metric tons to 20,000 metric tons, is actually going to be supplied by off-site renewables and emerging technologies. So this will be a combination of things such as an off-site solar farm. And of course, hopefully we'll be integrating new and emerging technologies such as the ones that Professor David Sinton is working on with his ISI. Now I'd like to sort of shift gears a little bit. That's our master plan. That's our 30-year vision. But I'd like to talk to you quickly and introduce Project 50, which is really our first big step in decarbonizing our St. George campus. Some of the highlights here about Project 50 and its goals is that we're looking to reduce the emissions scope 1 and 2 by over 50% for the St. George campus. And that represents 46,000 metric tons of carbon annually. What this project is going to do is it's going to partially electrify our central heating plant and start that aggressive transition away from fossil fuels. One of the things I really like about this is by really going to the source and the heart of the issue, it extends our reach and our impacts. We have a very large district heating system, and we actually also feed a number of third-party clients or colleges and buildings that we don't have direct control over. So actually affecting change to those buildings is very, very difficult. By affecting that change at the central plant, it does give us greater reach and impact very early on. We're looking also at utility and demand reduction strategies as part of Project 50 to mitigate the higher electricity costs when you compare to really cheap fossil fuels, such as natural gas. The savings for this project will be largely derived from avoided carbon taxes. And surprisingly enough, we're able to save 50% of our scope 1 and 2 emissions and actually have a project that has an attractive payback. I think we were going through the numbers the other day, and we have roughly an 8 or 9% internal rate of return on a project to decarbonize half of our campus. And when you look at a discounted payback, that represents roughly 16 or 17 years for assets that have a life that's well beyond that. Also, with this project combines significant mitigation of deferred maintenance risk. And to put that plainly is that we have a lot of aged assets on our campus, and they get to a point where even though they're well maintained, these do represent a bit of a liability. And so we've identified a lot of the higher priority items on the deferred maintenance sort of list for renewal. And we're able to tackle some of this and renew a lot of assets like chillers, like the boilers that I mentioned that were from the 50s and 60s, and actually replace these and renew the campus while also having a payback. There we go. So a little bit of an overview of Project 50 is the first component here is district energy modernization. So we talked about this a little bit, but some of the core pieces here are replacing some of the gas boilers with electric boilers, that central plant renewal and increasing the efficiency, of course. Our gas boilers are roughly 80% efficient, whereas the electric boilers are roughly 100% efficient. We're integrating also some demand management and energy storage capabilities in our district network, which will really serve to modernize that district network. If we look at the second bucket here, we have building retrofits. Here we're going to look at optimizing the building operation, performing those critical steam to hot water conversions to enable electrification of the heating and integration of renewable technologies, and of course, some local energy storage at the building level. Here we're going to be looking at some key buildings, potentially the Terrence Donnelly Center for Cellular and Biomolecular Research, looking at the Leslie L. Dan Pharmacy Building, and also looking at the Earth Sciences Center. The third bucket here is our low carbon node. Here we have 3 buildings comprised of the Exam Center, the Health Sciences Building, as well as 263 McCall Street. All 3 of these buildings are currently fed from Enwave steam. And one of our primary goals here is to disconnect these 3 buildings from Enwave and have them be self-sufficient with a low carbon node. So this will include measures like building optimization, of course. Again, the steam to hot water conversions, some strategic energy storage, and also some renewable technologies such as solar PV. In all cases here, the building retrofits are aiming to reduce the energy use intensity between 35 and 45%, as well as paving the way towards low temperature hot water and renewable heating sources. That's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's very exciting and ambitious, and of course, I look forward to seeing that. There's also a lot of other exciting and ambitious projects happening, and I think we're gonna look towards Scarborough and turn it over to Jeff to talk to us about what's happening at UTSC.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Miller. I'm of the U of T Scarborough campus, and it's a total honor to be here today to meet with all of you and be part of this. It's an amazing group, and there is so many exciting things going on that I think we all can be proud of. So it's a real pleasure to share ideas in this forum. I'm just going to walk everybody through a few initiatives that we've been developing in renewal and as part of our campus development. So one of the things that Mark touched on is the sustainable development and stewardship of new buildings, and that's certainly a part of our activities today because we're in a large state of growth. Also, we've been doing work in renewal, and I'm going to try and walk you through hopefully a little story that knits those 2 items together. So on the left is our existing campus map, and on the right is our master plan that speaks towards a campus towards 2050. And you can see our aspirations. There are many new buildings and new road alignments that begin to reshape how our campus functions from a physical planning perspective, but also provide an opportunity for our thinking around this, because as Mark described, with this becomes the ability to rethink our utilities and how the buildings interact with each other, as well as share ideas and develop buildings with quality stewardship. So just moving on to the next slide, this is a little bit of a forecast towards 2030. And there's a few new buildings here shown. Some of the buildings are further along, and some are really just ideas at this point, some things that we hope for. And we will be working as a campus to flush them out and see if they can become real. And so, some of the highlights here are, you can see, I'll just wave my mouse over the parking structure. I'll speak to that. I'll also speak to the student residence, and I'll speak to the other projects as well to a lesser degree. So this is just a little bit about how the development might look towards 2030. And you can see, there's many new facilities in our program. Taking us back to 2015, we introduced a environmental science and chemistry building, and this building was acknowledged for the CAGBC Core and Shell Innovation Award 2 years in a row, and unfortunately we came runner-up twice. But this is this was a beginning of trying to explore partnerships with faculty and learning opportunities for students. So we did work with NRCan on beginning to explore a standard for these earth tubes, which treat ventilation air entering this laboratory building. Next slide. So I think that from there, just like my colleagues, we've been looking at renewal in our existing campus facilities. And we had an opportunity to do so in beginning in 2017, and that began to work through and then resolve in 2019, and we continue to improve on this. But I think that we had an opportunity to introduce a geothermal field, and it went into the squared area in the courtyard around these portable buildings, and then it integrated into some of our larger existing buildings. And so I'll walk a few highlights of that. This is another image of the Geofield, and we did find a way to integrate it into our existing building. And this is a very close-knit tertiary area to our central plant. So just like Mark and the others, I think we're trying to rethink how we can bring lower carbon solutions into our scope 1 heating emissions to try and reduce our emissions. And so just highlight, this just is a bit of a colorful diagram of sort of the building and the areas that were impacted. It's a very, very large building. It's about 200,000 square feet. And this building was, ultimately really transformed through this initiative. Next slide. So I spoke about our development program, and this is a very, very active space for us as we work towards realizing our master plan. This snapshot is of the student residence, and this is a large passive house project. It is about halfway through construction, and the walls are starting to go in, and we're beginning to perform testing. So some folks may be familiar with passive house, but really in simple terms, it's a building with really thick walls and windows that really tries to create a really thick blanket around the building so that there isn't a lot of air infiltration, and it's a really snug envelope so that we don't have to heat or cool it as much. And one of the things that opportunities we're trying to grab is that we are bringing in trades from our community through various programs, and we hope to give them an opportunity to participate in this project and take back some of those experiences so they can multiply to other initiatives and other projects, throughout many sectors. And so, that is hopefully an opportunity that will, we can contribute a little bit to, and we're very excited about that. So on the right, you can see there is some air blower door testing. This is just a verification, so folks can understand and verify that there is, it in fact is performing sort of as designed. We continue to try and look at all elements of carbon usage, and one of those is the carbon we use in materials. And one of the things that we're hopeful for is utilizing mass timber, and this is happening across the university. So, we do have, as part of our parking bylaw, as we develop, we do need to provide parking spots. And we're trying to do that, in a very sound manner. So A parking structure is a very, very large building. It's very massive. It uses a lot of material. And the hope is to try and realize a mass timber parking structure. And we're working through that right now through our design process, as well as our municipal approval process, just to verify that we can bring this project through. And so whenever we do construction, there always is a certain amount of risk. And we hope to deliver this project, as planned. And it's definitely one of our, we're definitely highly committed to it. So just walking you through this, I think that, there's been a lot of looking at the orientation, the entry points, but also the ability to potentially convert the parking structure. So as we hopefully reduce our use of vehicles and move towards electric vehicles, is there an opportunity to transform this building into something else, because it's going to have a long life cycle. So just looking at this, we did look at a couple of options to convert it. These are archetypes, but it's sort of a test. So in the future, how do we reuse this parking structure as the use of cars hopefully starts to reduce and a public transit in Scarborough, begins to improve? Maybe we can realize a different use for this facility. And so one of the things we've looked at as a residence, we've also looked at, use it as staff and faculty offices. These are just a couple of images that give you a sense of that journey. We talked about embodied carbon, and I think that talked about embodied carbon, and I think that this is just a diagram that articulates how much carbon is offset. And it's really equivalent to about 1 year of our carbon production. So it's very significant. And I think that we're trying to get a better understanding about the boundaries we put on this, because there's a lot of parts to play in the carbon that's used to create materials. And I think as a group, we're trying to understand that better and just understand the kind of choices we're making to have the greatest amount of impact. I think that one of the things that, as will hopefully be part of this is many electrical vehicle charging stations. And like my colleagues, there's a view to renewables. And so this is just a diagram that shows the solar panels on the roof of the proposed parking structure and how they may knit into the electric vehicle charging stations. The other thing that we're looking at is our public spaces. So with all this development, there's all the spaces in between and the areas that are required to get from place A to place B and also experience our campus. And so as it grows, we want to see how it transforms. And so we're trying to look at these areas to promote urban farming, to understand food production better, and to create unique opportunities for teaching and learning. I think the other thing, that's part of this is carbon sequestration. I think we talked about that in some of the other slides. And, is there an opportunity to reforest certain areas, use an engineered base layer to some of our landscape features? And so this is all something that we're aspiring to, and we're beginning to launch projects that are smaller in nature and also knit this into our larger development plans. So with all of that, very similar, this is what we've accomplished today via our renewal. I think we've made some significant strides to take us from where we were in 2015 down to where we are now. So this is it's about a 40% decrease. I think that, we hope to continue that effort. We're always polishing this. These projects are really challenging and they require a lot of love to really, see them through and optimize them. And so that is, efforts we're going through. Together as a group, we've developed a development standard. This development standard is sort of ensuring that we can deliver our new construction in a very thoughtful manner. And so, this gives you some idea metrically about, where that leads us. And so you can think about this, the development is about, maybe it's 75% of our existing building stock, and you can see the dramatic difference, right? So these efforts that we're making are really making a difference. And, it's really important that we continue on that journey. And so when you look at how that normalizes overall at 2030, we've made a significant difference, but we still have a little bit of a ways to go. And so, similar to what you'll be hearing from many of my other colleagues, we're looking at what is future work? Is there an opportunity to create a similar project, multiplying what we did in 2019? And is there an opportunity to, utilize this campus planning exercise to look at our electrical grid and things that are coming to campus to try and really look at this more globally. And so we're undergoing this planning work with hopes of beginning to sort of understand it better from a nuts and bolts perspective, and begin to plan it and bring it forward. And so with that, that is all I have, and I'm sure I look forward to any questions and answers. And I just wanted to say thanks again to be part of this. And I just wanted to also add that we are having a knowledge cafe with some of our UTSC initiatives on March 23rd, and some of that will be advertised through social media and other university channels. So I just wanted to say thanks again, and it's just a pleasure to participate in this group.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So I'll turn over to our last panelist, Ahmed from UTM.
Thanks, Ron. Great presentations so far. I will do my very best to make this presentation sound less of mechanical engineering, but we'll see how good I do. So, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be part of this panel discussion to share and acknowledge UTM's progress and commitment in taking decisive action against climate change. Before I talk about low carbon initiatives through the Utilities Master Plan and the campus energy audit, I like to touch on first on couple of important sustainability initiatives we achieved last year. We presented UTM's first sustainability strategic plan in depth in one of the sessions from Adam's sustainability celebration last year. Nevertheless, I'd like to take a moment to highlight it again. I put the QR code on the slide. It will link you to the plan on our website. I invite you to read it at your own pace if you haven't done so. In general, sustainability or sustainability decisions at UTM is informed by this 10-year strategic plan. It was released in 2021, which aims to foster a culture of sustainability across our entire operations. The plan rests on 5 pillars: academic programs and curriculum, research, campus engagement, civic engagement, human resources, and infrastructure. Across these 5 pillars, the plan pursues 26 goals and over 50 targets, all of which are consistent with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System. So to that end, and in line with the objectives of the Sustainability Strategic Plan goals, I am delighted to celebrate that UTM received last year a silver rating under the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, also known as STARS. For those who don't know, STARS is the most widely recognized framework for sustainability performance in higher education. It's a program developed by ASHI, the Association of, or the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. As you can see, we earned 60% of applicable points across all categories: research, engagement, academics, operations, planning and administration, innovation, and leadership. We were only 5% away from achieving STARS Gold, which will set us apart when benchmarking against other universities. And we aim to achieve STARS Gold in the next submission, with a target to achieve platinum before 2030, or before the mandate of the sustainability strat plan. In recognition that climate change is one of the most pressing challenges of our time, UTM has developed a new utilities master plan that holistically considers and responds to the campus utilities infrastructure conditions, future capital space planning requirements, sustainability requirements, but also, more importantly, provide a pathway to a carbon neutral campus unique to UTM, while complementing the U of T climate positive vision. And I think this is the sentence that I will underline. This plan is unique to UTM, and it's intended to complement the U of T climate positive vision. So a little bit about the strategy. The expansion strategy for the UTM campus utilizes a nodal plant approach, where two new nodal utilities plants constructed with optional interconnections with the existing central utilities plant. Not sure if you can see my mouse, but this is the existing central utilities plant, and these are the two proposed new nodal plants. The first new nodal plant, CUP2, will be integrated within the F2 building on the north side of the campus, to be constructed in the next 5 years. While the second new nodal plant, CUP3, will be integrated within the athletics and the parking expansion building on the south side of the campus, to be constructed in the next 10 to 15 years. Both nodal plants will utilize centralized electrical infrastructure and a district ground source heat pump system with Geo Exchange bore fields to meet the connected buildings' thermal and electrical loads. The existing central utilities plant, CUP1, will undergo cooling and power system capacity expansion in the very near term, in 1 to 2 years, and more importantly, heating system decarbonization in the medium term. The strategy of the heating system decarbonization is very similar to the project that Mark presented on their steam plant, where first step is to convert steam to hydronic water, and then replace the boilers and optimize the system efficiencies. The nodal plant approach to campus utilities infrastructure offers greater flexibility for the campus to phase the utilities expansion strategy. When we compare to centralized or local building generation approaches, the nodal plant approach offers an effective balance between operation and maintenance efficiencies, reduce capital expenditures for infrastructure upgrades. The nodal plant interconnection that I touched on in the last slide enhance the system redundancy and resiliency for the campus buildings. Another advantage of that particular expansion strategy is sequencing of equipment will also be optimized to enable the most efficient combination of equipment to operate and deliver the connected loads. The utilities expansion strategy is estimated to reduce the campus equivalent carbon emissions by 70% relative to the 1990 baseline emission levels. This is a considerably deeper reduction when comparing to a business as usual scenario, where the existing central utilities plant, CUP1, will continue to rely on fossil fuels in the form of natural gas. As I said, the expansion strategy will also enhance the utilities infrastructure operating efficiency, redundancy, and resiliency to meet the future campus demands. 70% reduction is great, but is not good enough and does not necessarily align with the U of T climate positive strategy or the target that Canada had committed to by 2050. And we realized that the 70% reduction was only for new developments up to 2050 compared to the 1990 baseline. But we know that there are tons of opportunities that exist within existing infrastructure. So for that reason, UTM is undertaking a comprehensive energy audit of all existing 31 buildings on campus. A total of 2.35 million square feet of area will be audited between ASHRAE levels 2 and 3, as I said, in order to identify these deep energy and carbon reduction opportunities. The principles of the audit are consistent with the framework as defined or articulated in U of T's Tri-Campus Low Carbon Action Plan, LCAP, which is focused on clean energy and carbon capture, efficient distribution, and reduced consumption. We anticipate the completion of the energy audit by midsummer. So at that point, once we marry the outcome from the energy audit with our utilities master plan, we would have a really strong understanding of our ultimate carbon reduction targets by 2050. That brings me to the end of my slides. I hand it over back to Ron.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. That was just quite a phenomenal presentation by all of our panelists, highlighting what we've done and where we hope to go. It's quite aspirational for sure. We're going to open it up to some Q&A. So I want to just encourage audience to put in questions into the chat. I'll go through them, do my best to moderate. and to start that conversation. And maybe I'll pose the first one while I then go behind the scenes and start looking through the chat. And one thing that I was really struck out to me when I saw Professor Sinta, your presentation of your different themes in your different areas. And one thing that I thought was quite interesting, unique, and hopefully you could shed some light on, is the one related to health and wellness co-benefits. I'm curious, what does that mean to you? What type of work is happening in that space?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That one came about from looking at the sort of the more obvious areas that we might target in a co-call, and that particular one that Ron's mentioning is one where we're partnered with the university with Climate Positive Campus to fund projects that can be deployed on campus within 5 years. And initially we didn't have that one. It was interesting. We had some more of the ones that you might think of first around reducing carbon emissions and addressing the transition and what that means for campus, and also measurement that I talk about a lot. How do we assess our emissions, and how do we grow that scope? So the health and wellness aspect came from our friends in the Empower pillar, thinking more broadly about the transition and on campus, and that the energy, the changes associated with energy use and carbon, and how can those feed into overall quality of life. So it's a little bit, you can think of it as a little bit inspired by the University of Toronto sub-project I highlighted there. Yes, energy transition is at the center of that project, but most of the work surrounding it is how can that work for the community? How can that be net positive, not just for emissions, but for the community? Maybe in the most ambitious, can we use this opportunity, this transition, to improve quality of life and wellness? So doing that at the campus level, that's where that's aimed. The harder question, Ron, is how to do it, and there that's out of my league. There we're inviting the best proposals from around campus to make the case.
Thank you so much. And I'll note as well that there's an interesting article that came out of the Faculty of Engineering on a new Dean Strategic Fund initiative that also focuses on this. I believe that was Mariana Tucci, who's the PI on that is looking at that in partnership with others. I see John is here. I think he's on that study as well. So that is I like to highlight that question. Maybe it's somewhat, maybe I loaded it in that we were thinking and looking at this a bit more holistically. It's not just about carbon, but it's about all the broader sense of sustainability, with a keen eye of how it impacts, at least in the physical environment. How does it impact occupants and people of that nature? So a lot of great questions are coming through here. So I'm gonna select a couple so that we get an opportunity to spread the love, dare I say. And one question that came up, and Mark, it related to one of your presentations, or within your presentation, talking about offsite solar farms, and if we've given consideration to where they would be placed, and maybe some unintended negative consequences of having these things offset or displace farmland or other marginalized communities. So is there any insight into where the university is considering to place these?
That's a great question. We're starting our investigation to try and see where the optimal site might be to start placing some of these larger solar farms. And we are going to go through sort of a feasibility study to try and evaluate some of those impacts. The first priority here is really some rooftop. So rooftop solar, I think, is the easiest and the most logical choice. I think the roofs don't mind so much if we have solar panels on them. So we have a number of roofs at our St. George campus, as well as up at the UTIS campus, where we can install a pretty large amount of solar. It's in the megawatt range. So that'll be sort of our first choice. Then we'll start to actively pursue and evaluate the impacts of larger solar farms. A couple of the sites that we've identified as having potential are around Hart House Farm and Koffler Scientific Reserve.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate that. There's 2 or 3 questions coming in that are related to the scope of the type of emissions that we're referring to. And maybe I'll start with a comment and then pose the question to anyone in the group that wants to address it. A lot of the presentations we heard today were related to scope 1 and scope 2 emissions and how we considered scope 3 emissions of our institution. I can tell you from my lens, from my office, when we issued the climate positive plan for St. George, we were very, very specific and said, this is a climate positive campus plan, not a climate positive institution plan. Meaning, and what that means to me is that it only addressed on purpose and by nature of the plan, scope 1 and scope 2. Not that scope 3 is not important. It's just that we knew we could take action immediately on scope 1 and scope 2 while we quantify and address the problems in scope 3. One of the challenges we have is that there's no recognized methodology for quantifying the specifics of it. And one thing you'll notice in the call that Professor Sinton talked about through the Climate Positive Energy ISI is us putting a call out to the community to help us develop a scope 3 accounting methodology where we're looking for support from our community and from our faculty to develop a good, robust model so we can quantify it. Doesn't mean we're doing nothing. I think there's been great studies through living lab projects around what our air travel emissions look like. And it is true that it's quite significant. That the study that a student group put out, if I recall, and John will correct me if I'm wrong, it indicated as much as 25 to 40,000 metric tons annually. That's about 30–40% of our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions are air travel related. And we did launch the Air Travel Emissions Mitigation Initiative. Now, somewhat ironically, it launched March 1st, 2019. 2020. I like to say it was the most successful program in the world because we went from 20,000 tons to 0. Although I don't think we could take credit for that. We all know what happened a mere 2 weeks after we launched the program. We are looking to relaunch that program in the fall term, and we're actively working on that. So from my lens, scope 3 is extremely important. We started with scope 1 and scope 2 because we could, and we were ready to take real meaningful action there. But we are taking action on scope 3 in different forms. So I'm going to throw it open there because I know that the rest of the panelists are doing a lot of work in that space. And so feel free, any one of our panelists, if you want to jump in and make a comment about how you're addressing scope 3 on your campuses or within research.
I'll jump in real quick.
All right, Mark, thanks.
So Ron, you mentioned our air travel emissions mitigation initiative. So what we've been doing with my team here is we've been taking that to the next step and trying to actually identify and develop projects, scope 3 projects, which will reduce the scope 3 emissions on the St. George campus. So that's something that we're actively working on right now in support of that initiative. And like you said, it's not easy. We looked at about 5 or 6 different projects already, and we've identified that their potential for reducing scope 3 emissions using the funds collected from the ADAME program for business travel, the potential for reduction wasn't obvious. So this is definitely a challenging area, and we're actively investigating it, and we're looking at developing projects.
Jeff, Ahmed, anything you want to add from your campus lens?
I think one of the things that we're doing is really looking at the transportation piece. So we're looking at electric trucks. We're looking at promoting the electric vehicles, and there's a lot of development like you saw, and I expect that that's being delivered at Landmark as well and other contexts across the university. And we've been working pretty closely together on the air travel one, and we're trying to find a way that we can kind of mirror what our colleagues are doing with the air travel piece of it. So I think that the other thing we're trying to do is really trying to get an understanding of how transportation to and from our campus is going, and what are the really lobbying for it, as well as trying to get clarity on where it's going with respect to its planning. And that has been historically massive moving target. There's all kinds of projects and different phasing, and that starts up and then it gets revised. And so it's been a bit of a frustration, but I do believe that at some point it will happen. I think the city needs it, and we're starting to see projects downtown.
And just to add to what Jeff has said, in our sustainability strategic plan, we do have targets around transportation, electrification of campus fleet vehicles, and scope 3 reduction initiatives on food and dining. So there are targets around scope 3, not as aggressive as those on scope 1 and 2, but definitely something that we will, once we have our handle on scope 1 and 2, will be our next big focus.
Jumping in there, Ron, the good responses here got me thinking about the outside scope 1 and scope 2 aspects of our research programs, right? And maybe I'm going beyond scope 3 to scope 4 or some other, but when you think about the research that we're doing, our hope is, of course, that leads to reductions, right? That are not U of T owned, that go beyond our borders and result in reductions. And of course, some research we do could result in increased emissions. A little bit like the other scope 3 things, I don't know how to account for those either. That's part of the current challenge. But I think it's interesting to think about that, to think about the outcomes of our research programs, what technologies they enable, and the long-term emissions associated with those, again, outside U of T's borders.
Ryan, I wonder if I can jump in on this scope 3 question. We just had a call with the University of Edinburgh today, and it might be of interest to the other panel members to know they're looking really hard at student travel to campus to get, international students or students who live far away have to travel to campus into residence or whatever. They're taking responsibility for 2 round-trip tickets a year. That's what they're considering to be part of their scope 3 emissions. I don't think we've started even thinking about student travel, but they're actually I think they're ahead of us a bit on scope 3. So we might want to take a look at what they're up to on measurement. It's a huge measurement problem, as we all know, but also then on accounting for it and trying to address it.
Thank you very much, Sean. Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to David's point. I think that one of our greatest opportunities is our reach, whether it's through the work that we discussed today and the carbon reduction and how that might show leadership to other organizations and other initiatives, but also through our students moving forward and taking the experiences that they have and that of our staff and faculty through their research, and how that can really have a multiplication effect on expanding this into beyond our boundaries, right? Like, I think that's really probably our greatest opportunity.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions here in the chat, so I'm gonna maybe pose one of them that hopefully spurs on a bit of a conversation. And it's how is the St. George campus actually going to become a carbon sink? Will we be purchasing carbon offsets, or will we be looking at carbon sequestration technologies? And before I throw it open, for those of you that work with me, you probably know what I'm going to say. I have quite strong views about carbon offsets. And from our perspective, it's not something I endorse, primarily because we have such a huge opportunity on campus. I don't want to be taking U of T funds, U of T opportunities, and sending it to other people when we could be doing that on our own campus. And I think that's an important aspect of it. But maybe I'll start with Mark, and then definitely welcome other thoughts around. So how do we actually become a carbon sink? What's the current thinking?
So the current thinking on that, especially if I take the example of an off-campus solar farm, is when you look at the carbon accounting for that, the best practices indicate that for renewable technology such as solar, the emissions factors that you're offsetting are the hourly marginal emissions, which are substantially greater than the average emissions that you'll be using to offset that are being used on campus. So in the example where we're aiming to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions at the St. George campus by 80%, that leaves us with roughly 18,000 metric tons of carbon. So, and that carbon that's basically, it's almost no fossil fuels, it's almost all electricity. And that's at an emissions factor of roughly 50 grams per kilowatt hour. And then when we look at the offsite solar will be reducing at the marginal rate, and the marginal rate is upwards of 200 grams per kilowatt hour. So you kind of have a leverage there, 4 to 1. These are not exact numbers. I'm kind of just rounding the numbers for the example, but that's how we get to negative territory. Is the offsite solar can actually offset all of that 18,000 tons because it's measured at marginal rather than average.
So maybe another way of saying it is that we would be producing electricity offsite in excess that we still use on site from an equivalent carbon perspective. And that's how you end up in a negative territory. The other piece that maybe we didn't robustly answer in the previous one around location is that, you know, we are looking at doing this in UFT owned properties, like Mark said. We also bear in mind that we have a lot of researchers in this space of clean energy. So not only does it give us an opportunity to offset carbon, it also creates a bit of a laboratory. We have researchers in chemistry, for example, that are looking at coatings that you put on the cover of a solar panel, probably, that make it more effective, actually produces more electricity as a result. So in creating these environments, we create laboratories that are in situ, real world environments for people to continue that research. So there's always a bit of that double bottom line approach when I think of these things. How do we not only address this from a business perspective, but how do we also ensure we have that academic element, be it learning, teaching, and research within it? Are there other thoughts around creating a carbon sink? Maybe something we haven't mentioned, or other spaces that campuses or research are looking at that we want to end off with? No. All right, I went for it. I asked an off-script question, but oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, maybe this isn't my most the area that I'm most familiar with, but I think, you know, we are definitely looking at looking at our green spaces, and so, you know, what is their potential to support this, and how much can we learn about it? We have a large valley land that is a tremendous asset to our campus, and hopefully that can become a breeding ground for some of the thinking. But it certainly, the scale is important, and there will need to be other ideas far beyond that.
Great, thank you very much. Well, we've got about 1 minute left. So what I'd like to do first and foremost is thank everyone for joining us today, especially our panelists that put together the time to pull these thoughtful and meaningful presentations together. I can tell you that, you know, for my lens, it gets me excited. I can see that we've done a lot, but I think it also recognizes the fact that we've got a lot to do to get to where we want to go. I think that we've been honest in sort of our reflection around what is missing, where we know we have gaps, and so on. So thank you for that conversation, and thank you for everyone. I also want to thank CCCS for helping us pull these panel conversations together, and of course, Wendy Adams for her donation that makes this celebration possible. This session is recorded, and it's going to be available at the attendee hub for those that want to review it and look at it later. I think we're going to put a link in the chat to enable that. The next session occurs Tuesday, March 8th, 1 p.m. to 2:30, and it's focusing on sustainability curricular pathway programs and how we embed sustainability undergraduate student learning. So looking at it from many different angles, and so look forward to that, and hopefully you can join us. If you have any questions or comments, you could reach out to panelists, you could reach out to CCCS as well. We'd happily get you in touch and get you an answer. So thank you, everybody, once again, for your time today, and for the panelists for your thoughts, and for everyone for their participation. Thank you very much.